Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to check out You Build Monopoly. This is a game for 2 to 6 players for ages 8 and up, and the average play time is about 30 to 90 minutes, depending on which game mode you pick. Now this is still Monopoly in the sense that you'll be moving a piece around the board, buying properties. They're called districts in this game. And you can also charge other people rent. What's different is that this game introduces some new gameplay mechanics that will change the way you play. So without further ado, let's take a quick look at what comes in the box and how the game is played. Okay, now here's a very brief look at all the different components. And one thing I want to get out of the way first is my complaint about the box. There is really no box insert here. It's just you stuff them into baggies and put them in here. And on top of that, for these little pieces like the residential blocks and the industrial blocks, these are not the game's baggies. I actually had to find another game that had baggies. I think I had my Star Wars X-Wing miniature game handy. But I went ahead and put them in here because the bags that held these originally were not resealable. And when you've got a box like this with really no box insert to speak of, it's kind of poor game design. So make sure that whenever you buy this game, that you have some extra Ziploc handies nearby to hold some of these smaller pieces. Alright, so what you're looking at here is a smattering of different things. You've got your money here. You've got 10K, 50K, 100K, 200K, 500K, 1 million, and 5 million. So there's a lot of different currencies to break change with in this game. You've also got your properties, or they're called districts in this game, and they work similar to other Monopoly versions. You have the name of the district up here, how much rent they charge. If you have blocks on your property, which are like your residential or your industrial zones or whatever. I'm not going to explain them right now, but I will later. But just keep in the back of your mind, if you have those things on a property or on a district, they will increase in value, and the person that lands on them will have to pay more. Again, if you play Monopoly, you'll know what that means. Also, price of buildings, and on the back it has the mortgage value, that kind of thing. So you've got all of these. You've also got your movers here. These are the things that players will take control of throughout the game. They'll pick one and then start on go and then work their way around the board buying properties and all that. You can move around with these dice here. You've got different structures here. Again, these are your residential and industrial buildings that you can put on top of these locations like so. And they are stackable. Well, supposedly they are stackable. So if you want to buy 2 residential, for example, you could just stack them on top of each other like that. So you can stack them like so. What else do we have here? We've got these orange structures. These are hazards. And hazards basically prevent a player from using their houses to charge other people money. Should a player land on a property that has a hazard and they have to pay rent, they only pay the base rent. They don't pay, if there were houses on, say, this property here, and a person lands on this and has to pay someone else rent, they don't have to pay the amount of money that they would normally pay with the houses on it. They would only pay the base rent. So these hazards are a nice way of getting out of paying someone a lot of money. I'll explain these later on. But you've got these bridges here, and bridges do a various smattering of things, but they also work as a chance space. So whenever players land on this, they can draw a chance card, which are these here. Just to quickly show you some, you've got taxi, keep this card, add or subtract 1 space to or from any roll, discard after use. Rent dodge, keep this card, say no to paying rent on a later turn, discard after use. You've got get out of jail free, open up bridges, free build, inheritance, all sorts of stuff here. What else do we have? These green buildings are like bonus buildings, and you can put them, again, on various locations here next to these districts to give yourself some sort of buff, and basically they protect you against these hazards. You've also got this other building. It's not a bonus building. It's called a stadium. Why it's the same color as these other ones, I don't know. But basically, a player that has a stadium next to their property can actually get 3 million when they pass go instead of 2 million. So there's that. There's these railroad tiles that can be added to the game. They don't really have much of a purpose, honestly. One of the nice things about this game is that you can design the board any way you want to. This is just the suggested starter track. But let's say that you don't want to create a loop and you want to create like a straight line. You could put one railroad on one end and one railroad on the other end, and that'll serve as your start and end point. So players will know, okay, when I get to this space, I skip over it and then go to the other railroad, skip over that, and then go on the next space. So it's sort of like just to identify the start and end points of the track if the track is not connected via a loop. But honestly, you really don't need them. Again, you've got more properties here, and you can create the track any way you want to, so you may have some left over. But you've also got like these planning permission spaces that do a number of different things. And these tiles are, you can see that they're connected. So some might be orange and purple, some might be just flat out green and green, and so on and so forth. So you can play around with that. You've got these bases here that connect these towers together like so. And I'll show you what those do later on. And I think that just about does it. Let's go ahead and get you set up with a regular classic or regular starter game and show you how some of the gameplay works. Okay, now like I was saying in the very beginning of the video, there are different game modes that will determine how long your game will actually be. The manual comes with 3 preset game modes. There's the starter track, the classic, and the pro. Though you can design your track any way you want to. Just keep in the back of your mind that if you stray too far from the suggested tracks, then balance may be upset a little bit, and some things may not work out just right. But anyway, here is an example of the starter track. It's in the manual here. It's for 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 minutes to play. The game will show you how to set it up. It'll show you what structures you can use for this particular game mode. It'll tell you that you can only use 1 die for movement, and it'll tell you how much starting cash each player will get. And if you opt to use one of the other ones, there's a classic and pro in the back here. This is for 2 to 6 players, and it's for 60 minutes, so it takes 60 minutes to play this one. Here's a look at the track there. These are all the different buildings that you'll use, and this is each player's starting money. And here's a look at the pro track. And again, as you can see, it's fairly big. So yeah, you're going to be in for a long play time here. It's about 90 minutes, and again, 2 to 6 players. You'll be using all of the buildings in this game, 2 dice for movement, and you'll give this much money to each starting player. I'm not going to really go over each one in detail, but just keep in the back of your mind, there are multiple ways to play this game, and you can even customize your own setup if you want to. And the game even has a guide on the back if you want to set up your own freestyle tracks. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the starter track, and even though this is a starter track, I'm going to do my very best to show you what some of these other buildings do, even though they're not even used in this game mode. The object of Monopoly is still the same. Move around the board with your mover, buy properties, and then when other people land on those properties, you get to charge them rent and get some of their money. Whenever someone goes bankrupt, the player with the most money at that point will win the game. Okay, so on a player's turn, what they'll do is they'll roll and move clockwise. They'll go ahead and resolve wherever they happen to land. As you can see, there's a lot of different things that could happen depending on where you land. I'll go over those in a minute. As an optional step, you can build up to 3 residential or industrial blocks on a district you own. Again, this is the starter track, and the industrial buildings aren't used in that mode, but I'll explain them anyway and use them here. Optional, you can also move a hazard 1 or 2 spaces at a cost of 1 million per space. And then after that, your turn is over. Okay, so let's say you roll the die and you land on an unowned property. Let's say I land here. Now I can buy that or auction it. If I want to buy it flat out, I just simply pay the cost on the tile. In this case, it's 1 million. So I would go over to my money, pay the bank 1 million, and then I would get the appropriate district card from the stack here. If it happens to be owned by another player, let's say that this is owned by yellow, green would have to pay yellow a certain amount of money. Again, to determine what that would be, you'd have to find the district card in question, the Bayview dock, look at the land rent, it says 60K on here. So the player would owe yellow 60K. Now if there are houses on the location, let's say if there's a house on here, you would look under number of blocks, and it says 1 here. You'd go over to the right, and there's a new value here, 300K. So instead of paying 60K, without having any houses, you'd pay 300K for this one house. Eventually, you can add up to 8 blocks on one location. And for this particular location with 8 blocks or 8 residential houses here, that's 7.5 million. So the more houses that you put on a particular location, the more money that you can charge another player. Okay, so I've shown you what happens when you land on a district that is either occupied or unoccupied. What happens when you land on these planning permission spaces? You won't see them in the starter track, but you will see them in the Classic and the Pro. It allows a player to do one of three things, and only one of three things. You can put a bonus building next to a district that you own to make it immune to hazards. Again, hazards will cause houses to be nullified. So if you own a lot of houses on a district and you have a hazard next to it, you only can charge the base rent. You can't charge what those houses would normally charge. So you can either build a bonus building next to properties that you own. You can build a hazard next to properties or districts that your opponent owns. So let's say that it is green's turn. Green lands on this space and yellow owns these. So he could put these next to here. And if there are any green houses on here, they would no longer function. Okay? So that's another thing that the player could do on their turn. Finally, when landing on this space, you can move a hazard by one space. So you could move it, say, like that. Free parking. Nothing happens in free parking in this version of Monopoly. I know in other variants and other versions of Monopoly, you can land on this space, then pay a certain amount to travel anywhere you want. Other players collect money in the center of the table and then collect it all at once when they land on the space. Nothing like that happens here. As far as these bridges, a lot of different things can occur depending on whether or not you land on them and whether or not you pass them and whether or not the bridge is open or closed at the time. If you happen to land on one of these bridges that are open like this, you have to pay $1 million to the bank in order to close it, and then you get to take a chance card. Now, if you already land on a bridge that is already closed, okay, if it's closed and you land on it, you can open it for free to sabotage the guy behind you, because now they have to pay $1 million to close it, and then you can also take a chance card. Alright, so you're probably wondering what happens if I pass a bridge. Again, that all depends on whether or not it's open or closed at the time. Let's say this yellow guy is here and he moves here. Okay. Now he passed an open bridge. He has to pay $1 million to close it. And that's it. He does not get to take a chance card because he didn't actually land on that space. Now let's try that again with the bridge closed. Let's say the bridge is closed and he moves here. Nothing happens. The bridge is shut. He doesn't get to open it or anything like that. The only way you can open a bridge to sabotage the guy behind you is to land on it. Okay, so again, different rules come into play whether or not you land on the bridge and whether or not you pass it. Okay, the go to jail space, that's very obvious. If you land on that, you go to jail. If you're playing the Classic or the Pro, which involves 2 dice, if you roll 3 doubles in a row, then you have to go to jail, and you can also go to jail if you draw the appropriate cards. Now, let's go ahead and show you real quick what some of the rules are for being in jail and how to get out. So, while you're in jail, you can bid in auctions and collect rent on unmortgaged districts, but you cannot build or move hazards. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Up here, to get out of jail, you stay in jail for 3 turns, but still roll the dice when it comes to your turn. You can wait until your next turn, then pay $500K fine before you roll the dice, then roll and move as normal. You can roll a double on your turn and move that number of spaces. If you're playing the starter track, you're out of jail if you roll a 6. If you haven't rolled a double or a 6 in the starter game, after 3 turns, at the start of your next turn, pay the banker $500K, then move accordingly to what you rolled. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what's the difference between these green residential blocks and these gray industrial blocks? Well, for the most part, price and the gray ones have a special ability. Let's just say, for example purposes, that yellow owns this and green lands here. So green's going to have to pay yellow some type of rent. Okay? So in this case, you'd have to look at the appropriate district card. For 1 block, it's 300K. Okay? If there were a hazard next to this, green would only have to pay the base rent of 60K, because again, hazards will nullify these green houses. Okay, now let's just say that yellow had an industrial block on here instead of a residential. Okay, now in that case, let's say green lands here, he'd still have to look at this, 1 block, 300K. If there were a hazard here, he'd still have to pay 300K. This hazard does not nullify these industrials. Now, how much more expensive is it to have this special ability? Well, let's take a look at the district card. On the very bottom, you can see that building a green residential block is 500K per block, whereas industrials are 1 million per block, at least for this particular district. So the gray ones are much more expensive to build, but again, they are immune to these hazards. Okay, now there are a few miscellaneous things to note about building these buildings on top of these districts. You do not need to have a set of same color districts in order to build houses. So if yellow owned this, but not this, yellow could still build buildings on this location. Okay, that's what's different about this compared to Monopoly. Monopoly, you have to have the entire set. In this game, you don't. Okay. You can also build a combination of green and gray buildings if you want to, but you can only stack light colors on top of each other. So you could put more green on top of this one and more gray on top of that one. Okay, so there are a few more buildings to go over here. There's the Monopoly Tower here, there is a skyscraper here, and there's a stadium here. Again, the stadium is not considered to be a bonus building that is separate from the other 3 green bonus buildings that are available in the game. Again, I really would have liked it if it was a different color. Okay, so to go over what they do, I'm going to opt to refer to the rulebook, because as you can see, there's a few rules here to take into consideration. You have to own 2 or more districts of the same color in order to build a stadium, a skyscraper, or the Monopoly Tower. The skyscrapers, once you own all of the districts in one color group, you can build a skyscraper next to any one of them. You can't build residential or industrial blocks on the same turn. You can build 1 skyscraper per color group, and a skyscraper immediately doubles the rent value of all districts in its color group. If you build a skyscraper and it touches another player's district as well as your own, it does not affect the rent value of the other player's district. Okay, so there's that. The stadium here, it costs $2 million to build that. Buy the stadium to increase your salary. There's only 1 in the game, so be quick. Once you own 2 districts of the same color, you can build the stadium next to one of them during your turn. Collect $3 million every time you pass go instead of $2 million, even if the district is mortgaged. The stadium does not increase the rent value of a district, and the stadium is not a bonus building and does not protect your district from hazards. Finally, the Monopoly Tower. Once you own all of the districts in 2 color groups, you can buy the Monopoly Tower and build it next to any district in those groups. The Monopoly Tower doubles the rent value of every district you own. If the Monopoly Tower touches another player's district as well as your own, it does not affect the rent value of the other player's district. Alright, there you have it, a very brief look at You Build Monopoly. It's important to stress that I did not cover all of the rules found in the manual, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. If I have the time, I'll look in the manual and see if I can get an answer for you. As far as what I thought in my first impressions of this game, for $10 there's a lot here. What I don't like are the quality of the components, and especially the box insert. Again, there's no reason to package these little pieces in baggies that cannot be resealed. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it forces you to have to get your own baggies so that the little pieces aren't flying all over the place in the box. Had there been an actual box insert and open from the top and fit snugly into those little holes, that would work. But in this case, you've just got a huge hole here for everything, and then you've got a little hole here for the money. That's basically all there is. So again, I think the design on the box could have been better. These tiles here are smeared with black. I'm guessing the ink on these didn't completely dry or something. So there's black, I don't know, just black smear all over these tiles. So again, the quality of the components could use a little bit of work. But for the rest of it, I think it's a great game. There's, like I said, a lot of different ways you can play. You can customize your own tracks. You don't even have to create a loop if you don't want to. You can just have like one big straight line, and you can end on one, start on the other one, and just keep going, you know, over and over again. So with a lot of different ways to play, a lot of different modes, and a lot of customization options, I think this is a good pickup for $10, honestly. And I think I've even seen it 5 and below for $5. So if you can grab this for cheap, definitely do it, especially if you're a Monopoly fan. So if you guys want to see the full review, you can at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com. If you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, that way you can keep up to date on any new content I happen to publish. This is Vince, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.